Monday, perspective from on the crisis from the famed Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. Up next, a CNN special report. Strike against Yugoslavia. The host is Judy Woodruff. Now.
This is CNN. Newsstand, CNN and Entertainment Weekly will not be seen tonight. This is a special report from CNN. NATO admits to a terrible accident.
NATO deeply regrets the loss of life for civilians from the attack yesterday on a convoy.
We go to extraordinary lengths to reduce the risk to innocent civilians.
But questions remain, and the investigation continues. In the U.S. Congress, growing support for a ground troops option.
It is a great mistake to say that we're going to rule out any possible use of ground troops.
Others feel at least you should do the planning.
And focus continues on the desperate plight of displaced civilians.
Now we are most concerned about the fate of the refugees, hundreds of thousands of them, trapped inside Kosovo. They are unable to leave, but afraid to go home.
A CNN special report, Strike Against Yugoslavia. From Washington, Judy Woodruff.
A tragic mistake, regrets, and more strikes in Yugoslavia. In this CNN special report, we will examine NATO's connection to the bombing of a civilian Kosovar convoy. NATO accepts responsibility, but blames Yugoslavia for giving the ethnic Albanians reason to flee. As a new day begins in Yugoslavia, Serbian TV reports strikes in 6 towns, including Novi Sad and Podgorica. In Pančevo, Serb TV reports fires are burning in the country's main oil refinery. Far from Yugoslav soil, U.S. military leaders are rallying support for NATO's operation. But they are met with skepticism, the specter of ground troops, and the possibility of Americans being killed. More than 3 weeks into the strike against Yugoslavia, refugees are still crossing the border by the thousands. Their injuries are treated, but little can be done to ease the weariness of their struggle. While saying it regrets that civilians were killed or injured in the convoys, NATO is vowing to press on. In Mayo, Yugoslavia, the scene of the attack, CNN's Brent Sadler talks to survivors and looks at the damage.
NATO's explanation as to what might have caused at least some of the carnage took time to evolve, but the alliance eventually admitted it mistakenly bombed a civilian vehicle in a refugee convoy in southwest Kosovo. This was the aftermath of what NATO concedes was caused by a United States weapon dropped by an F-16, aimed, said the pilot, at what he identified as a 3-vehicle military convoy, engaged, he thought, in burning homes and ethnic cleansing. The living, as well as the dead, were taken to Jakovica Hospital. Many of the Kosovo Albanians were still filled with disbelief that NATO had caused deaths and injuries among refugees. We saw the planes, she says. We were on a trailer. My 5- and 6-year-old daughters were killed, as well as my brother-in-law and his wife. Yugoslav officials claim NATO struck another convoy on the Jakovica to Prizren road. Reporters, under tight Serbian control, were able to visit bomb sites and take notes. Charred bodies still lay by the roadside and in nearby fields.
No one could commit such a grave mistake. No one could apologize himself for killing 75 people and wounding 26 people that he made a mistake. The price should be paid in the court of justice. This is simply outrageous to say that that we acknowledge a mistake.
NATO continues to target key oil refineries and fuel depots, especially in Novi Sad, Yugoslavia's second largest city. Recent NATO attacks around the capital have been brief but intense. Anti-aircraft defenses more active than before. The attacks against Yugoslavia are unrelenting, destruction mounting and casualties rising. But one tragic accident in Kosovo, says NATO, would not weaken its resolve to keep up the bombing until President Slobodan Milosevic backs down. Brent Sadler, CNN, Belgrade.
It is important to point out here that CNN crews and correspondents covering the aftermath of NATO strikes are escorted by Yugoslav or Serb officials. Outside of Belgrade, our reporters are not permitted to travel without official escort. There's been a great deal of confusion about the attacks on refugee convoys, with sometimes contradictory information coming from Belgrade, NATO, and the Pentagon. CNN military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre tries to sort out what we know at this point.
NATO concedes a small number of civilians might have been killed in Wednesday's airstrikes on suspected military convoys in southwest Kosovo. For example, at this site, an American F-16 pilot bombed what, in retrospect, may have been a civilian vehicle. NATO released an audio tape of the pilot's account to try to show it was an honest mistake.
We see 3 uniformly shaped dark green vehicles, and I'm convinced now they're preparing to set this next house on fire. I make several passes over these vehicles to ensure that they are in fact military vehicles. I roll in on 2 passes to get a close look, both with my eyeballs and with my targeting pod. I roll in, put my system on the lead vehicle, and execute a laser-guided bomb attack on that vehicle, destroying the lead vehicle.
But of 4 attacks in the area, NATO takes responsibility for only 3, including 2 strikes along the road from Jakovica to Prizren. It says one attack was against a small convoy of 6 military vehicles, the second against a much longer convoy that included civilian vehicles the Pentagon insists were not hit by NATO bombs. Who was responsible for a 4th attack further down the road is unclear. Television pictures of the area shot under Serb control show a grisly scene of carnage, including the twisted wreckage of tractors. The Pentagon claims the convoys attacked by NATO did not include tractors. The U.S. points the finger at the Yugoslav military, based on reports from international observers who believe Serb warplanes attacked the fleeing Albanians, and a refugee report claiming the convoy came under mortar attack. In Albania, this man told CNN he was in a convoy of tractors that was struck by a green plane that was flying very low. NATO warplanes are not green, and they rarely fly low because of the threat from ground fire. On the other hand, most Yugoslav planes are green, with the exception of MiG-29s. But that is not proof, and the Pentagon admits it lacks the evidence to say for sure its planes were not responsible for this highway of death. Whatever the truth, the U.S. blames Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic.
For him to talk about atrocities when an error occurred on the part of someone trying to carry out a mission to save their lives, I think is one of the most grotesque statements that I could conceive of.
NATO says it can't make the rules designed to prevent civilian casualties any stricter than they already are. In war, it says accidents will always happen. One NATO spokesman put it this way. He said, sometimes one has to risk the lives of a few in order to save the lives of the many. Judy?
So, Jamie, in other words, they're saying no changes in procedures or operations as a result of what happened?
That's right, Judy. They say that already pilots are under instructions not to drop bombs unless they are 100% sure in their mind that what they're hitting is a military target, and that if there's any doubt, they're to come back without dropping the bombs. In this case, the one case they confirm, they say every indication was this was a military target. There was no way for the pilot to know. And they say accidents will happen. They say to restrict the pilots anymore would mean they'd essentially have to give up their campaign against Yugoslav President Milosevic.
All right, Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. Thanks. Well, telling the difference between military vehicles and a convoy of ethnic Albanians is not always easy, evidently, for NATO pilots. Retired Lieutenant General Larry Farrell is well acquainted with the difficulties pilots encounter. He was an F-16 wing commander for the United States Air Force. General Farrell joins us with some insight. General Farrell, how can these mistakes happen?
Well, it's sometimes easy to misidentify things, but that's why these pilots are trained. In the old days, before we had the targeting pods that they have now, just doing it with the eyeball, like you heard the pilot talking about using his eyeballs first, it's very difficult from 15,000 feet to tell the difference between vehicles. But with the equipment they have, the targeting pod, it's got a magnification capability. So remember, he said, I put my eyeballs on it, and then I went back to my system. He went back to his targeting pod, which is magnified, and he should be able to, from 15,000 feet, easily tell the difference between vehicles.
You heard Jamie's report. You saw those pictures. What do we know about what happened?
Well, what we do know is that the pilots who were involved think they targeted military-type vehicles. They call them a deuce and a half, which is a 2.5-ton truck, and it's a 2.5-ton truck is not very similar to a tractor with a trailer on it, and you should be able to tell the difference. Now, NATO was also saying that while they did strike 3 convoys and some civilians may have been injured, and they also admitted that there may have been some civilian vehicles in one of the convoys, they have never acknowledged directly attacking any civilian vehicles. And they imply that perhaps that 4th convoy was attacked by Yugoslav airplanes, and I believe there was a report from one of the refugees that they received mortar fire in one of the convoys, and that would not obviously be from airplanes.
Is it that difficult to tell the difference between a big military truck and a big civilian truck? I mean, what is it hard? How hard is it to do that?
Depends on their external characteristics, but if it's a military truck, they're normally some sort of an olive drab color. They kind of look the same. The pilots are trained to recognize them. I would say not very difficult. The pilots should be able to tell with the equipment they've got what they're attacking.
Now, let me ask you about the overall air campaign. I mean, they've now been at it for, we're what, in the 21st, 22nd day of
Correct.
This campaign? Yes. An amateur would look at the situation and say, for 20-some days of air attacks, shouldn't significant damage have been done by now to the Yugoslav military? Yeah. And what's the answer to that?
I would think that you could say that there probably has been significant damage, but until the war's over, until you've achieved your objectives, there's still a lot of targets to be hit, and I think that's what you're seeing now. And if they would put the map up, that we could see the maps of the bombing tonight.
You've got a map that you can use here.
Well, here's the Kosovo map here, and we were talking about the convoys that were hit. Here's the Jakovica right about there, and the road kind of goes down towards Prizren, which is the ancient capital, and this is the stretch of road along here where the 4 attacks took place, and so that kind of tells you the major action in Kosovo, and notice that it's very close to Albania where that happened.
Why would they be going after a few military vehicles in this area?
Well, it looks like that the Serbs have pulled their vehicles down probably towards this area here. The initial ethnic cleansing occurred up in here and around in this area here, and as the KLA retreated further south, the Serbs were following them down, and it looks like they continued their ethnic cleansing down in this area here, and pursuing the KLA further south and cleaning villages out as they go, and they're pushing it towards Albania.
Now, to look again at the bigger picture, when you say by now, and I've just been told by our producer Sue Bunda, we're in the 23rd day, so we want to clarify that of this NATO air attack. How much is left to do before you know, whether it's Milosevic crying uncle or whatever it is? How many more days? I mean, some people are now talking in terms of months. That seems unrealistic. Mm-hmm.
Well, remember when they first started, when the chiefs briefed the Senate Armed Services Committee, they said this is going to take a long time if you just elect to do it just by air. They also said it's going to be very difficult to prevent or stop ethnic cleansing just with air, but that the air campaign could take a long time. And they weren't specific about how long that was, but we think probably they were talking about more than a month. And we're into the 23rd day, so I would expect that you're going to see it go at least as long as we've seen it go before now. But what they've got to do is they've got to turn the intensity up, and they haven't hit the intensity yet that they want to be at.
Well, how much more intense can it get?
Well, they started out with about 50.
If you want to, I know you've got another map if you want to refer to that.
They started out with about 50 shooter sorties a day, and they started hitting some of the major cities. Belgrade here, Novi Sad, which is a major center, and they started hitting the lines of communication down this way. Here's Nice, the city that we've seen so many attacks at. And then there's a line of cities right along here that lead towards Sarajevo, and that's a line of communication. They've been hitting that. And if you look where the bombs are going off today, I would expect that you would find that they're going off around where these major centers are. They're continuing to attack petroleum centers, refining centers. They've hit some power plants now, communication centers, command and control nodes, telephone switching centers, and they continue to hit headquarters. But there are quite literally thousands of military targets in this country. So they can go on for some weeks and not visit all of them.
All right. Retired Air Force General Larry Farrell, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
For being with us. Thanks. Well, NATO duty has objectives that at times conflict, as we've been saying. On the one hand, destroy the Yugoslav military machine. On the other, the human factor. Protect your crew and those fleeing harm. CNN's Jim Bitterman explains from Aviano, Italy. It is a dilemma that NATO pilots deal with daily.
Each time pilots lift off on their missions, they confront three potentially contradictory priorities: to hit their targets, to avoid civilian damage, and to reduce risk that they could get shot down. Sometimes those rules can make their lives very complicated. For the first 2 weeks of the bombing campaign, for instance, Royal Air Force pilots were forbidden to, quote, bomb through the clouds. That is, drop their unguided 1,000-pound and cluster bombs in bad weather because of the increased possibility they could miss their targets. And they could not fly below clouds because that would put them at risk from anti-aircraft fire.
When you give them the task and something gets in the way, say, for example, the weather, with the type of operation that you're intending to carry out that day, it is frustrating when you have to report back to the higher authority that you weren't able to achieve the task that they set you.
Once they got better navigational equipment, the British pilots also got authorization to drop their unguided weaponry on some missions. But they still stay high. NATO will not say how high exactly, but from dozens of conversations with air crewmen and from details about the mistaken attack on the Kosovo refugees, it seems clear that for the most part, pilots are flying above 15,000 feet or 5,000 meters to stay out of range of anti-aircraft fire. And as that accident also made clear, despite precision-guided weapons, bombing from high altitudes may not be as precise as low-level attacks. As well, bombing the very people NATO is trying to help pointed to a kind of military truism.
The number of mistakes is proportional to the volume of the air operation and the difficulties that are encountered.
And that raises another challenge for the airmen, the question of fatigue in a mission without a definite end. While all NATO members restrict the length of time combat crews can spend in the air, many of the pilots involved in the air war are now flying 3 or 4 times as much as they do in training, with the additional stress of actual combat. While those involved in the attack on the refugee convoy have not been identified, no one here at Aviano, where many of the raids against Yugoslavia are being launched, would have welcomed the news that NATO was responsible for the deaths of the refugees.
I feel very sorry for all those folks. And it's just sad to see. No one wants to see people die, but we understand that's part of what this business entails.
Jim Bitterman, CNN, Aviano, Italy.
President Clinton was in California today talking with newspaper editors.
There is a common drumbeat on the airwaves now, and it is that you personally lack the moral authority to be commander-in-chief. And certainly, I guess there's a powerful inclination to ignore those criticisms, but if you had to address it to an Air Force pilot, how would you, who had listened to the same radio shows and perhaps been persuaded to that point of view, how would you address that?
Well, I don't have to address it to the Air Force pilots. I am his commander-in-chief, and they swore an oath to the Constitution, and they have performed admirably. And they don't deserve to hear that. I just have seen a lot of our Air Force pilots. I just went down to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. I spent I spent hours talking to the families, the friends, the people that were there, encouraging people to say what they think. One person said something critical. Several hundred said, "We believe in what we're doing. It is the right thing to do. Thank you for doing it. We are proud to do it. This is what we signed on for." This is a democracy, and people can say whatever they want to say. But I have found that the American people, vast majorities of them at least, appreciate it when I don't spend my time responding to them, and instead I spend my time working for the American people and trying to do what I think is right. I'll let other people be their judge about whether they think I should or shouldn't do something. But I have no response except to get up every day and try to do my job.
CNN's John King with more on the president's appearance when our special report, Strike Against Yugoslavia, returns.
The AIM Investor Pop Quiz. The first step to smarter investing is hoarding every penny, cutting up all your credit cards, seeing a financial consultant. Invest for the long term. Invest with discipline. AIM Mutual Funds.
Sunday, we offer insight on the future and perspective on last week. The Week in Review in the New York Times. Expect the world.
People go through a lot just to get great tasting water. Now there's a better way. Introducing the Pure Touch faucet with a filter right inside. Pure Touch, exclusively for Moen.
Stanley?
He is the ultimate thief.
This classic Mac.
The law can't catch him. He's not gettable. But she has a plan
Transfer $8 billion into my account.
for the perfect trap. Our company.
You are keeping it strictly business.
Strictly. Sean Connery.
You're playing both sides.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
You'll have it all.
Ving Rhames.
This is big enough.
Entrapment. Rated PG-13. The Trap is set April 30th.
It's been your lifelong dream to own and drive a car like this. Sorry, pal. Yours isn't here. And might not be back soon, because you didn't ask your car dealer to install LoJack, the only stolen vehicle recovery system used by the police. Alarms might scare off joyriders, but not professionals. For total protection, get LoJack. If your new or used car is ever stolen, get it back with LoJack.
I was born to be a cashier. I've been a cashier for 35 years. That's my office right over there. That's where I do all of my business. Getting muscles working. I know most of my customers by name. Really, I do. Hi, Gabby. How have you been, Rico? Thanks, George. You don't have to stand in my line because I'm fast. For me, it's an easy job because I have so much fun doing it. Our goal here at Home Depot is to have the lowest prices in town. If you find an item in another store for a lower price, we'll meet and beat that price. Does that make you happy, ma'am? Extremely happy. People deserve good prices because money is hard to come by.
The AIM Investor Pop Quiz. I worry when I miss the financial news, the world news, the basketball game. Have peace of mind. Call your financial consultant about AIM mutual funds.
Top United States officials traveled to Capitol Hill Thursday. Their mission was to win the hearts and minds of lawmakers as they sought support for the administration's Yugoslavia policies. CNN's Candy Crowley reports.
The nation's top diplomat, the military's top brass, and its chief civilian deployed to Capitol Hill in search of political reinforcement. What they found were reservations from those who think the U.S. ought to get out of the Balkans.
I would suggest that the best way that we can support our troops is to keep them out of Kosovo, out of a protracted war that we, in my opinion, are not going to end up winning.
And reservations from those who think the U.S. ought to get in deeper.
NATO should begin now, perhaps, to move heavy equipment into the region within striking distance of Yugoslavia, both to threaten Milosevic and to lend protection to countries such as Albania, which are now threatened by Milosevic's troops.
And reservations from those who wonder how we got to this point in the first place.
What Milosevic is doing and what he has done is intolerable. He has to be stopped. He should have been stopped long ago. I think this administration has made a botched-up mess of trying to do it. I think there were other options that we should have pursued.
The Clinton administration's power troika was adept at defense. The secretary suggested that not going at all was not the American way.
And we could sit on the sidelines. We could fold our arms and say it's not our problem. But I think that would have been a real challenge to our own humanity.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff explained that going in with more was not the NATO way.
And I think probably the only option worse than no option would be having an option that would be used or threatened for which there was not political consensus to carry it out. So it was a NATO decision to only have an air option.
The Secretary of State freely ceded the point that not all trouble spots are treated equally without having to cede any ground on policy in Kosovo.
You know, because we can't do everything everywhere doesn't mean we should do nothing nowhere.
Nimble on defense, the trio was sobering on offense. Told privately by lawmakers that the American public is not prepared for what's ahead, the Clinton team laid it out. An intensified air campaign of unlimited duration and danger of unknown proportion.
There's a high risk of casualties involved. We've never tried to, in any way, disillusion this committee or anyone else. This is a very tough circumstances in which we place our troops.
I think the prospects for casualties remains very real and high. As you're all aware, there is no such thing as a risk-free military operation.
No one is more aware of the risks than Republican John McCain or Democrat Max Cleland. McCain spent 5 years as a Vietnam POW. He can't understand why NATO, now in a war, doesn't give it everything it's got.
Limited actions beget limited results. You fight a war to win, or you don't fight it at all.
That's one of the lessons of Vietnam. Senator Cleland, who lost both legs and an arm in combat, remembers another.
I think we are on very thin political ice. Kosovo is not ours to save. It's not ours to lose. It's not ours. It's Serbia's.
The administration insists Kosovo is not Vietnam, but many hear the echo quite clearly. Candy Crowley, CNN, Capitol Hill.
No let-up in the air attack. That was President Clinton's message, even as he expressed regret for ethnic Albanians killed when a NATO bomb hit a civilian convoy in Kosovo. CNN's John King is traveling with the president.
That is what he did.
The president voiced sorrow and regret for the tragic civilian deaths in the NATO convoy bombing. But he blamed Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic and vowed the pace of Allied airstrikes will only intensify.
If the requirement is that nothing like this can ever happen, then we're saying it's okay with us if Mr. Milosevic displaces over 1 million Kosovars, kills and rapes thousands upon thousands of them.
Pictures of the convoy carnage brought this question after the president spoke to newspaper editors.
Did we screw up?
Mr. Clinton says the pilot thought it was a military convoy and that the growing number of civilian deaths is unfortunate but inevitable.
There is no such thing as flying airplanes this fast, dropping weapons this powerful, dealing with an enemy this pervasive, who is willing to use people as human shields and never have this sort of tragic thing happen. It cannot be done.
Mr. Clinton said the United States and its allies will have an obligation to rebuild Kosovo when the bombing ends, and he pointedly voiced the view that long-term peace in the Balkans will require the fall of the Milosevic regime.
Realistically, it will require a democratic transition in Serbia. For the region's democracies will never be safe with a belligerent tyranny in their midst.
The president encountered spirited anti-war demonstrators here in San Francisco. But a new CNN USA Today Gallup poll, taken before NATO said it may have mistakenly bombed civilian vehicles, shows his position is in sync with the majority of public opinion. 61% of Americans back U.S. involvement in the NATO strikes, and an identical percentage support the president's handling of the Kosovo crisis. Only 43% support sending in U.S. combat troops now, but a slim majority, 52%, say they would support using ground troops if the airstrikes fail to drive Serb forces from Kosovo.
We cannot allow the Milosevic vision, rooted as it is in hatred and violence and cynicism, to prevail.
The president restated the official U.S. opposition to Kosovo's independence. But the president also paid public tribute to the rebel Kosovo Liberation Army and suggested that weeks, if not months more of NATO strikes might ultimately cost President Milosevic his hold on the province. John King, CNN, San Francisco.
The emotional toll of this crisis on some Kosovar refugees when we return. But first, a bit of news that affects U.S. troops serving in Operation Allied Force.
It's the day that inevitably comes each year for almost every American, the deadline for filing taxes. But with the current situation in Yugoslavia, the U.S. government has changed its policy for some Americans. Who are they, and what was the change? The answer when Strike Against Yugoslavia continues.
Sunday, a modern story of David and Goliath. 3 L.A. teens go against the odds to shut down a middle school on contaminated land. CNN and Time, 10/9 Central.
Oh, no, I forgot Mother's Day!
Don't panic. A dozen red roses are always the perfect gift. That is, if they don't drop dead in days and cost over $60. This year, give her beautiful silk roses that last a lifetime. Forever Roses, for only $19.95. She'll be delighted when Forever Roses are delivered right to her door in a professional florist box filled with a dozen of the finest silk roses and a personalized greeting card, all for just $19.95. But wait, call today and we'll include a second dozen absolutely free. That's 2 dozen long stem roses handcrafted from the finest silk to stay as beautiful as the day you sent them. Our drivers are standing by and guarantee delivery by Mother's Day. Call now to order Forever Roses for just $19.95. Supplies are limited for this Mother's Day. To order 2 dozen silk roses, call 1-800-242-4200. That's 1-800-242-4200.
The Moneyline News Hour with Lou Dobbs, weeknight 6:30 Eastern on CNN.
It's the day that inevitably comes each year for almost every American, the deadline for filing taxes. But with the current situation in Yugoslavia, the U.S. government has changed its policy for some Americans. Who are they, and what was the change? The answer: the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed a measure today requiring that the IRS extend exemptions and benefits to U.S. military personnel serving in Operation Allied Force. The deadline for filing tax returns is extended. Hazardous duty pay is tax-free. Now, back to Strike Against Yugoslavia.
Tired and hungry, thousands of ethnic Albanians continue to stream out of Kosovo into neighboring areas. And they say thousands more are behind them. CNN's Ben Wiedemann reports on conditions at the Albanian border.
More Kosovars trudge into exile in what has become a daily ritual at the Morina border crossing between Albania and Yugoslavia. Many of the new refugees are like Agim Zanelli and his family. They came from Mitrovica, north of Pristina, with a story heard often. They stole everything, money, documents, even my cigarettes, says Agim. We had to give them everything. Serb paramilitaries allowed them 15 minutes to leave their home, then torched it.
How many do you have? They asked us, and we said we have only 600 Deutschmark. They said give to us, or we will kill us, everybody of us.
Relief workers say that once more the bulk of the refugees are women, children, and the elderly, many in alarming condition. Today is one of the worst days I've seen, says this French doctor. People are completely stressed. Many hadn't eaten in days.
Some have walked as many as 80 kilometers to get here. So there are a lot of foot injuries. Everyone's absolutely exhausted. Some of the kids are dehydrated.
Hafiza Moulay collapsed after crossing into Albania. Her 2 sons too confused to comprehend. After the initial flood of refugees, the number of people crossing the border here seems to have stabilized. Between 3,000 and 4,000 cross the border each day, as Serb forces continue what appears to be a systematic village-by-village effort to rid Kosovo of its ethnic Albanians. From the border, some of the refugees are trucked to a French camp, where their tattered feet are doused with iodine. But there's little that can be done to relieve the pain of their flight from home. Out of harm's way, the reality of their first day of exile sets in. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Kukës, Albania.
As for the thousands, hundreds of thousands of ethnic Albanians still inside Kosovo, it has been very difficult to get information because of restrictions placed on Western journalists by Belgrade. Los Angeles Times reporter Paul Watson has managed to remain in Pristina throughout most of NATO's air campaign. He talked to us about what he has seen and heard.
In the first few days in Pristina, there was sort of a controlled anarchy, if I can use that expression, in the sense that there were people in uniform who appeared to be police, soldiers, and Serb civilians with weapons. It was a terrifying few days for everyone here. There was a lot of looting going on. I spoke at length with the wife of a leading human rights lawyer who described in great detail how men in uniform, who she considered to be police, but was told by government officials couldn't have been police, took her husband and her 2 sons away. They were found a day or so later, shot dead outside of Pristina.
Paul Watson says that he has been able to go out on the roads in Pristina unaccompanied by Serb officials over the last several days. He says that he has seen fires burning in villages and columns of refugees moving in different directions. But he says Serb forces prevented him from speaking to the refugees. More than 4,000 U.S. Marines and sailors shipped out from North Carolina today, headed for the Balkans. They are bringing equipment, including food and medical supplies, to set up refugee camps. Help for displaced Kosovars is also on the way from Greece, as senior White House correspondent Wolf Blitzer reports.
CNN has learned a Greek diplomat is now in Belgrade working out details of a medical and food supply operation for displaced people in Kosovo. U.S. intelligence reports say hundreds of thousands of ethnic Albanians are hiding in the hills and forests, and some are dying from starvation. One relief worker just back from Kosovo says their plight is getting worse.
There's clearly been an increased willingness to use them as human shields. Many of them are displaced, and we know that food supplies have been running short since we all left March 24th.
Diplomats familiar with the Greek mission say Yugoslav authorities have agreed to permit several Greek trucks to drive from Greece to Macedonia and then into Kosovo in the coming days. If that works, the diplomats say, more trucks will be on the way. The mission has NATO's support.
We're working with all of our allies and partners on that on an urgent basis.
Greece, a member of NATO, has an Orthodox Christian population like Serbia. The Greek embassy remains open in Belgrade.
We are working at it. The international relief agencies are working at it. A lot of countries that have some relationship with Serbia are working at it. And we are doing our best to try to figure out how to resolve it.
NATO officials have rejected introducing ground forces to fight their way into Kosovo with supplies. They've also rejected airdrops as too dangerous.
The airdrop right now doesn't appear to be feasible, but we haven't given up. We're looking at other ways that we can arrange to try to do the same thing for them.
Right now, the Greek initiative seems to have the best chance. On the agenda, permitting the Greek branch of the relief organization Doctors of the World to expand its operations from Pristina throughout Kosovo. If the Greek initiative succeeds, it could spark a new diplomatic initiative to end the fighting, with Greece playing a central role. But for now, U.S. officials insist that's very premature. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, the White House.
And when we return, lessons learned from past conflict in Yugoslavia.
There's no formula for loving your cat, but there is to feeding her.
Hill's Science Diet. It's what more vets like Dr. Gretchen Becker feed their own pets. And now with the innovation of new hairball control formula, it's no wonder. It's the first and only cat food with natural vegetable fiber to help control hairballs.
So nourish your cat's spirit. Let Science Diet nourish the rest.
Now with hairball control formula. Science Diet. What vets feed their pets.
Will features like voicemail work when I travel?
Let me ask my supervisor. Hello! Well, that all depends. If it's traveling from Zone A to Zone B, or B to C, or E to F, or S to D, or B to D to Q, or A to C to M to E, or J to G.
Sprint PCS works the same wherever you go. On the nation's only 100% digital, 100% PCS network built from the ground up. Plus, you get the new free and clear plan, including free long distance.
Hey, thanks.
Hi. Sprint PCS, the clear alternative to cellular.
So it's true, isn't it? You guys really are moving?
Yeah.
Well, that's just great.
Well, listen, they have to sell the house first.
So?
Well, selling a house takes time. We'll at least have the whole summer together.
You think? Goodbye! I'll miss you.
Nobody knows homes better than Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
4,032, 4,033, 4,034, 4,035. Is that big enough? No, that's not big enough.
4.7 million books, videos, DVDs, CDs, and gifts. There's only one place big enough to hold Earth's biggest selection, Amazon.com.
Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3.
The promise of the internet is not in the future. It's now. The bandwidth to change everything. Ride the light.
Pentagon and NATO strategists are studying the history of the Yugoslav resistance during World War II. CNN's Bruce Morton looks at whether lessons from the past can apply to the present.
The Nazis invaded Yugoslavia in April 1941 and conquered it in 12 days at a cost of just 151 German lives. Serbs and Croats fought the Germans and each other. Underground resistance formed quickly.
In fact, the Yugoslav armed forces in the interwar years had built on a tradition and made plans for a kind of resistance based around small groups of partisan bands.
The Germans won battles. A 1953 U.S. Army study notes 2,000 guerrillas dead in one operation, 3,500 in another, but the guerrillas lived to fight on. These pictures were from late in the war when they were doing well. The Germans wanted troops on the Eastern Front fighting the Soviets, not in the Balkans fighting guerrillas.
What they did was they forced the Germans to put more troops in there to hold the place down. And the Germans really were faced with the prospect of having to keep a lot of troops there for a long time, as anybody else would.
They did maintain forces in the Balkans to operate against the partisans or other resistance groups, but it was a question of priorities, and they never committed themselves wholeheartedly to stamping out the resistance.
Tito's partisans were the dominant group. As the war went on, they controlled territory, got supplies by air from the Allies in Italy, evacuated casualties the same way. By late 1943, that U.S. Army study estimates, the Germans had 600,000 troops in the Balkans, battling 145,000 guerrillas, most of them Tito's. And the war was turning. Italy surrendered, Soviet troops rolled into Romania, Germany was losing. Belgrade fell to Soviets and partisans in October 1944. Are there lessons for now?
We may see irregular bands resisting, as well as regular armed forces and the militarized police force, which are currently operating in Kosovo, should a NATO-allied ground force attempt to intervene in order to force a settlement.
I think the lessons you learn from that is that you have to have the support of the population when you're going to be doing anything. So perhaps in Kosovo you might expect to have support of at least the Albanian part of the population.
The last paragraph of that 36-year-old U.S. Army study of the Nazi occupation reads in part, "It is unlikely that German commanders will ever face these occupation problems in the Balkans again. However, a review of the mistakes these commanders made would undoubtedly cause them to urge any future occupier to begin his administration with a clear-cut statement of policy, including a promise of eventual withdrawal of occupation troops and self-determination for the people." Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
Coming up in our special report, how new mothers are adjusting to life as a refugee. We'll tell you where some are finding help when we return.
The AIM Investor Pop Quiz. I should panic if interest rates rise, technology stocks fall, my daughter starts liking boys. Invest for the long term. Invest with discipline. AIM Mutual Funds.
So it's true, isn't it? You guys really are moving?
Yeah.
That's just great.
Well, listen, they have to sell the house first.
So?
Well, selling a house takes time. We'll at least have the whole summer together.
You think?
Nobody knows homes better than Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
Join the fun of Singapore's Millennia Mania celebrations anytime from June 1999 to August 2000, and you may win a free return vacation. There'll be one lucky winner every day for 458 days.
The sexiest movie of the year is now the best picture of the year and the winner of 7 Academy Awards.
It is a new day. It is a new world.
It's everything you want a movie to be. Shakespeare in Love, rated R. Now playing everywhere. And also from Miramax Films. Dustin Hoffman presents the film the New York Times calls Sexy, a simmering, wonderful romance. One of the best films of the new year. A Walk on the Moon, rated R. Now playing select theaters.
Hello. Is this phone clear? Well, that depends on your definition of clarity. What? Clear like this? Or this? Or clear like this?
Sprint PCS gives you the clarity of the nation's only 100% digital, 100% PCS network, built from the ground up. And the simplicity of the new free and clear plan, including free long distance.
Great, I'll take it.
Sprint PCS, the clear alternative to cellular.
The AIM Investor Pop Quiz. College may cost over $100,000. You should gamble on a hot stock tip. Put everything in a savings account. Smile and heat up a bottle. Have peace of mind. Call your financial consultant about AIM mutual funds.
For additional coverage of the crisis in Kosovo, go to CNN Interactive's in-depth site at cnn.com/Kosovo. Now, back to Strike Against Yugoslavia.
As you would expect, pregnant women, new mothers, and their children are especially vulnerable to the stresses of refugee life. Many are finding care at a camp in Kukës. CNN's Eileen O'Connor reports.
These tents serve as a beacon of hope for many refugees. The end of a road of terror and trauma. The first step in the process of healing. For the Medical Corps of the Italian Red Cross, this is just another evening in another 24-hour workday.
There was this wounded people, so 3 of us was here until 4 o'clock of this morning. Then we was again here at 7 o'clock.
So that's normal?
Yes, it's normal.
In 3 weeks, they've seen the full breadth of the suffering these people have endured, dressing their wounds, listening to the stories. So many close calls. Clarim is 2 months old, but the weight of a newborn. He arrived badly dehydrated, suffering from exposure to the cold. His fearful mother says he was fine until the night served police rousted the family at gunpoint. They told me to give them all my money or they'd shoot my 13-year-old daughter, she says. After that, her breast milk dried up. She could no longer feed Clarim. Malakata Rafiko says she, too, was marched off at gunpoint. Give us your money and jewelry, she says they demanded, or we will kill the child, an 8-month-old in the group. The stress spelled the end of her pregnancy several weeks early. She hasn't named her baby yet. It's hard, she says, to celebrate here.
3 nights ago, a month early.
Why?
Oh, they are walking 2 weeks in the meadow, in the field, you know.
Is it also stress?
Yes.
3-year-old Hassan has a head injury. His sister, a broken leg. Knocked off their tractor when it flipped over from the shock of an explosion.
During the voyage.
They got shelled and the tractor fell over.
Yes, I think so.
Doctors say without a CAT scan of the head, they can only hope it's not more serious. The family says they never saw the plane that dropped the explosive. Doctors here cannot help but take the tales to heart. This medic wants to adopt this 80-year-old woman as his grandmother. There's just something about her, he says. Like so many here, she's all alone. Her son, too, died fighting. Eileen O'Connor, CNN, Kukës, Albania.
Almost more than you can bear. The refugee crisis in Kosovo is prompting people from all walks of life to help, either with money or time. CNN's Gary Tuckman has more.
They are images that have shocked and saddened people no matter what their political positions on Kosovo. And they are images that have made many feel the need to take action.
It really made me think of the Holocaust and, the slaughtering of 6 million Jews and, got me thinking, well, what can I do? What can I do to help?
Jennifer Zimmer is an employee of Bell Atlantic in New York City who has given a generous donation to a relief group offering help to Kosovar refugees. Bell Atlantic is one of many corporations that in turn are matching the donations.
It just made me feel like I could be at least a small piece of the puzzle that might eventually bring relief to this area.
The first time you saw the images of the refugees on television, how did it make you feel?
Oh, I had a sense of outrage.
Sin McLean is a freelance artist who also felt compelled to do something.
Phone work today? Yeah. Okay, great. Hoping that you would do.
She is now volunteering 2 days a week to the relief organization Doctors of the World, which provides medical help to the refugees.
Hello, Mr. Miner. This is Sin McLean. I'm calling for Doctors of the World. I feel like I'm part of the solution rather than simply ruining my health, getting sick about the whole thing.
The stories of Sin McLean and Jennifer Zimmer are not isolated ones.
USAID, Kosovo Op Center.
The U.S. Agency for International Development, which works closely with volunteer organizations, has set up a hotline for people wishing to help.
Been a tremendous response. We've had something like 35,000 calls in just the week since we've set up the phone bank, and we've had about 80,000 hits on the website.
Many relief volunteers frankly admit they would not have been able to find Kosovo on a map just a few weeks ago. But now Kosovo, and in particular Kosovars, are an important part of their lives.
Sin McLean says her new work has given her a strong sense of fulfillment.
I just tell people, don't underestimate how getting involved can make you happy.
Gary Tuckman, CNN, New York.
Still ahead, from relative obscurity to recognition around the world. We'll profile a key spokesperson in the Yugoslav crisis when we return.
He is not a politician. He does not wear a military uniform. And yet he is a powerful figure in NATO's propaganda war against the Serbs. Who is he? The answer when Strike Against Yugoslavia continues.
I've always prided myself on being honest, and at times I've even gotten a little bit of trouble for it. So it really bothers me when some club makers say that oversized is overrated. The fact is, in a properly designed club, bigger is better. Most amateurs need the forgiveness and confidence in a bigger club head. Give these new Great Big Bertha Hawkeye titanium woods a try. They're the most forgiving woods I've ever hit, and that's the truth.
The new Great Big Bertha Hawkeye titanium woods. Go hit the greatest Big Berthas ever.
The promise of the internet is not in the future. It's now. The bandwidth to change everything. Ride the light.
It's justice I'm looking for, and it's justice I'll get.
You go off chasing Ballard, I'll never see you again.
In a town where there was no law.
Earl Redding did not fail the law. The law failed Merle.
One man
7 days. I'm coming for you. Go, come.
made his own. John Cusack and John Goodman star. The Jack Bull premieres Saturday at 9 on HBO.
So it's true, isn't it? You guys really are moving?
Yeah.
That's just great.
Well, listen, they have to sell the house first.
So?
Well, selling a house takes time. We'll at least have the whole summer together.
You think? Goodbye. I'll miss you.
Nobody knows homes better than Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
He is not a politician. He does not wear a military uniform. And yet he is a powerful figure in NATO's propaganda war against the Serbs. Who is he? The answer, Jamie Shea. He is NATO's chief spokesman, a man on whose word thousands of journalists hang daily. Each afternoon, 3 o'clock Brussels time, He descends to NATO's press room to brief at least 400 newspaper, radio, and television journalists. Shea has been with NATO for 18 years, from humble minute taker to respected spokesperson. Now, back to strike against Yugoslavia.
For more on the man behind the soundbite, we turn to CNN's Patricia Kelly in Brussels.
I've asked the Secretary General and also Saka.
In case you've been wondering,
here at the podium,
the accent is South London, even when he's speaking French,
nous ne considérons pas que l'accord de Rambouillet soit mort.
which is nevertheless fluent. After nearly 5 years in the job, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea has become a media celebrity almost overnight. The voice of NATO strategy.
Let's go at the front.
His daily double act with the military men is shown live worldwide. They may outrank him, but they never outshine him. His daily briefing has settled into a pattern with a homily on democracy.
Democracies are always going to be at a fundamental disadvantage.
Regular literary references.
Reminds me of George Orwell's 1984.
And not so literary tongue twisters.
We will weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not.
But he does speak with the authority and full weight of NATO's 19 nations. With Jamie Shea in the firing line for questions, ambassadors get to preserve their anonymity. And the NATO Secretary-General gets a break from the media crush his appearances attract. Jamie Shea is one of the few who gets to sit in on ambassadorial meetings. Javier Solana is his third NATO Secretary-General.
And he's doing a fantastic job now.
He was at the late Manfred Werner's side.
Secretary-General
Shea was also spokesman for Willy Klaas, who was forced to resign after being implicated in a Belgian political scandal. Shea is rarely stumped for an answer, the result of a career focused on defense issues. An academic with a pair of impressive university degrees and a string of scholarly books and publications to his name, Shea has managed 3 more languages in addition to his English and French. He remembers nearly everyone's name and affiliation.
Doug, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Pierre, and then I think we'll close down.
The schoolmasterly attitude comes naturally. He lectures students at universities throughout Europe. He's equally at home at the side of the Secretary-General in Sarajevo, as he is back at headquarters in Brussels, having a beer with colleagues. But Jamie, everyone's on first-name terms, has made it known he doesn't want to stay NATO spokesman much longer. He's 45 now and says he's vaguely looking for something else to do after the summer. He doesn't yet know what.
Okay, Patricia, please.
Patricia Kelly, CNN, Brussels.
And that's all for our special report, Strike Against Yugoslavia. Stay tuned to CNN for the latest developments in this story. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thanks for joining us.
Sunday, a modern story of David and Goliath. 3 LA teens go against the odds to shut down a middle school on contaminated land. CNN in Time, 10/9 Central.